So I want to welcome everyone to the start of not only a new semester, but a new semester of the AI-SDM seminar series. For those who aren't familiar, AI-SDM is an NSF-funded institute, a National AI Research Institute, one of 27 such institutes. And it's a collaborative effort between Carnegie Mellon, Harvard University, Boston Children's Hospital, Howard, MITRE, Navajo Technical University, Penn State, University of Washington, Texas A&M, and Winchester Thurston. I think I got the whole list there. And we've just started year 2 of our institute, and there were just so many great initiatives that started in year 1 that came out of this institute. And if you want to learn more about them, please do visit our website, our YouTube, our LinkedIn. That's my shameless plug for the day for AI-SDM. And along with all that work in year 2, we're going to be continuing the theme of definitely bringing in folks for our seminar series who are working on AI-SDM work. But we will also be sprinkling in some new speakers, some students, some postdocs who are working on some related items just to keep things fresh. And I actually met Howie. I met his robots before I met him. So fun fact, during a tour of the robotics lab when I was in business school, and his work really involves doing, creating, innovating, deploying, and he's your classic CMU doer, your classic experimentalist. I had the privilege of sitting in on one of his lectures maybe 2 years ago, and in previewing today's talk, what's really amazing to me is the diverse number of applications where this technology is being deployed and making a real difference in addressing societal challenges. So I'm pleased to introduce Professor Howie Choset from CMU, where he's the professor of robotics, the co-director of the Biorobotics Lab, and the director of the robotics major. Howie, please take it away.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks for taking the time to come out and see me speak. I know it's Friday afternoon. You guys probably have other things you want to do. But as Norman said, my name's Howie Choset, and I'm a faculty member in the Robotics Institute. I've been lucky enough in my career of 28 years to attract a lot of hardworking, creative, smart people to work with me on a variety of projects. And each of these people who come to me, I'm just so fortunate. And for those of you who are in my group, I do say this normally. Okay, but one of the common denominators I think that permeates what my group's work does, and I think it is sort of in the DNA of Carnegie Mellon, is that we run the pipeline from basic research to applied research, sometimes to commercialization. And we like to tell the story that those applied research, the problems we see in the real world, actually drive what we're going to be doing in basic research as well. So if you read the abstract, you'll see that there is this variety, and maybe some of the intellectual themes that run through what we do in my group have to do with making, as the title says, big problems smaller. So that's dimension reduction. So hopefully you'll see that theme. Also, we figure out ways to expedite search by deferring when we really have to search, as well as interleaving search. And finally, again, we spend a lot of time building stuff. So my research group has gotten a lot of notoriety for these snake robots. And what we'll talk about today is some of the math behind it, and maybe another cool robot there. But here, my student Chow Wei, he's now a CEO of a company in Shanghai, made this ballet of snake robots. And what's nice about them is that they have all these joints, these degrees of freedom they can use to thread through tightly packed volumes, getting to locations that people and machinery otherwise can't access. So one of the applications was urban search and rescue. So here, my robots are in Mexico City. So I actually, with Robin Murphy, used to be part of a response team. So it's a rare combination of skills, being able to speak Spanish, snake robots, and rescue experience. This was the response, and we went down with our robots, And just to give you an idea of how desperate we are, we're just shoveling things, and this also shows how unprepared we are. That bucket there, that's what's protecting us from the sun, so we can see the screen. In this case here, Julian's about to send a robot into this building where we believe there might be, is this the same picture? It's this one. We might believe there might be someone trapped. It turns out there wasn't anyone there. About 13 years ago now, we actually sent some robots into some areas of archaeological importance in Egypt. One of them was one of the void spaces underneath one of the Great Pyramids. And there you can see there's me wearing my Pittsburgh shirt among my new friends. And we sent the robot into some crevasse underneath the Great Pyramid, hoping it would link to a channel in the other Great Pyramid. 2 days after I left is when the Mubarak regime changed. So there were a lot of challenges that these deployments highlight for us, these snake robots, but the big one is, actually I'm curious, what do you think the hard part is in driving these robots around? What do you think it is? If you all think it's easy, why aren't you doing it? Yeah, that's it.
Probably the hardest part would be modeling, just because it's a very unique shape in terms of actually getting the physics model to work.
So getting the physics model, that's one thing, which I might add, we didn't have when we went to Egypt, and afterwards we did. It's another one. So if you move your hands around in some controlled way, it's pretty spectacular. Now, you're not special, okay? It's spectacular, but he can do it too. It's coordinating all those joints, those degrees of freedom to get purposeful motion. That's, think about having a joystick or a board in front of you with 30 little dials, and you have to turn them each your own special way in order to make the robot go the way you want. That's just hard, okay? I think the math behind it should be, obviously it's hard, but there's intuition. So the way we handle this is we look at the robot, there's a space, we call it configuration space. And we divide that configuration space into two parts, the shape of the robot and the location of the robot. So like, this is like an XY theta, and these are all the internal joint angles. A gate, this is the famous mulberry horse running. A gate is simply a cyclic path in your shape space that causes motion in your position space. So what we want to do is figure out ways to prescribe gates so we can make the snake robot, go in the direction we want. A common question people sometimes ask is it autonomous? If I have a joystick pushing this snake robot forward, there's still those 16 joints being coordinated or autonomous that figure out where the robot should go. So, and you can see other examples, that's a worm. Other examples of robots that have gates. This robot here is one of the older snake robots that Chris Bohr did, and that launched a whole DARPA program. So here's some notation, G, position, orientation. Here, this alpha 1 and alpha 2. Imagine for the moment we have a 3-link snake robot, alpha 1 and alpha 2, with the joint angles of that robot. And there's this relationship, which for those of you who took kinematics, it looks like a Jacobian relationship. What you have is, here are your joint velocities, and this is your end effector velocity, but now it's your body velocity. And it's related through this matrix that looks like a Jacobian, it's a connection, okay? So we have all these degrees of freedom. I'm trying to reduce it down to something simple. For the moment, just this 5-degree freedom system. So now, if you look at that connection, and it turns out people since the early 1970s, Nobel laureates, were working on this exact problem, and I don't want to say they were stuck, but they didn't have the insight that roboticists have playing with Jacobians that allowed us to solve some problems very quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this Jacobian here, and we'll plot each row of that Jacobian. So you all know, those of you who took my class, know the ith column is the ith degree of freedom. The jth row corresponds to that workspace velocity. So the first row, let's say, the x velocity. And we're going to plot as a function of alpha 1 and alpha 2 that vector field. If I tell the joints, excite in a way that flows with our vector field, we'll get maximal displacement. If I tell the joints, the alpha 1, alpha 2 to flow to excite orthogonal to the vector field, the robot's not going to move because the dot product of orthogonal vectors is 0. So that's how you make a gate. You just draw a loop in your shape space, take the dot product of the tangents, and boom, you have your gate. The thing is, that's a little bit tedious. So what we do is we take recourse to Stokes' theorem. If you recall, Stokes' theorem, the area enclosed by this loop is the same thing as the curl of the vector field. And so now all you have to do is just look at it's kind of hard to see on this plot, at this height function, draw loops around bumps, and boom, there are your gates. Easy peasy, okay? So what we've been able to do now is to get to our full 16-degree of freedom system. You could have a 16-dimensional shape space, but that is hard. It's 16 dimensions. So I want to talk about reduction. So what we do instead is we think of our shape space as modes. This is actually a sine function, this is a cosine function. So we've two modes, instead of two joint angles, two modes, and the combination of those modes prescribe different shapes. And again, you have a loop in your shape space, this kind of modes, and you get your robot to go, where you want it to go. Okay, so this is two of my students' PhD theses done right there. So for those of you who feel like your life's work can be summarized in 2 slides, there you go. I really don't mean it that way. So the next student who worked in these geometric mechanics, his name was Tony Deere. He's now a professor. The first one was Elie Shamas and Russ Hatton. But Tony, what he did with my friend Scott Kelly is we put this robot on a shaking plate. Okay, so if you excite the plate, can you excite the joint angles to make the robot go where you want to go? That was what Tony thought about. Okay, and that was a good use of time. And he was able to steer this robot exactly as he wanted. And the contribution there was trying to figure out new kinds of relationships among position and shape spaces. What got me excited about this is this fish experiment. Okay, so this is a famous experiment from George Lauder. That little fishy there, he's dead. Could have been a she, I don't know. Okay, but the point is, it's dead. All right. And what's happening is George is firing vortices at the head of this dead trout. Okay, it's recently dead, by the way. And those vortices naturally excite the natural frequency of this fish, and it's able to swim upstream. So these trouts have some innate, you can call it mechanical intelligence, that it's just built in to let it go upstream pretty easily. Okay, so that's kind of nice. The thing I'm interested in is this word I can't pronounce, and that is when little fishies are swimming in a swarm, this fishy is looking at this fishy to figure out where to go next. That's the conventional theory. We believe the fishies are still looking at each other, but I think this fish here is deploying vortices to hit this fish behind it. Okay? In other words, this fish is sort of causing this fish to move in a very specific way. And I call that mechanical communication. That's a hypothesis that we have. So with one of my students, what we're doing is we're using that shaking plate as a surrogate for water. So we have one active snake robot on the plate. Its motion causes the plate to move, and then that causes its friend to move in a very, its friend is passive. There's motors here, motors there. Cause its friend to passively move, and this is what we're working on right now. It's Albert Schu's part of Albert Schu's thesis defense. So that's nice. By the way, if anyone is interested in working on this, let me know. But I want to talk about one more application, maybe 2 more, and then we'll go into the next topic. So one of my students from 17 years ago, Rohan Thakur, he is actually a high school student. He sent me this beautiful email asking to come work in my lab, and I said no, and then his mom and I spoke, and the mom came out and watched him for an hour and said she was leaving because she trusts her son. But he worked in my lab, and then he worked as a student in the lab, and then he left and went to JPL. And he got part of this team called the EELS Project. And what happens is, so you know about Saturn, it's the planet with the rings. And there's a moon that surrounds Saturn called Enceladus. And Enceladus has the largest known ocean in the solar system, I think. And in the whole surface, but underground, so it's like a cap of water. And in the southern hemisphere of Enceladus, there are these geysers because the rock is about 2 kilometers thick. And there's holes for a snake robot to swim. Bless you. So we're trying, and trying is a strong word now, there's plans to build a snake robot. It's already gone, their snake robot's already gone to some ice things up north to go to a Celldis, land, and then get into the ocean, swim around. Now, the smart people, think there might be life, because there's water, and we know there isn't life there. Okay, let's face it, there's no way there's life there. But they're asking me to work on a snake robot that'll go to another moon. So of course you want to do that. So that gets us to this robot here. This robot is called Hummers. And actually, we started building this around the same time JPL approached us. And it's pretty cool. There's actually only 2 other robots like this in the world. One is from Professor Hirose in Japan. He's like the grand poobah of all robots, I think, including snake robots. The other one is built in Norway, and we refer to them as the Norwegians. And their robots each took about 10, 15 years of experience in order to build over time. They took a long time to build their robots. Ours took about 6 months. Don't you think that's pretty good? Why? Yeah, well, of course you do. Of course you do. Everybody, there's Ralph, he's part of the team that builds these robots. Why do you build this robot so quickly? There's 2 reasons. Everyone, there's Ben Freed. His is the work I didn't put in my talk, so he feels compelled to speak. Yes, sir.
Modularity.
Very good. Modularity. What's the other reason?
I forget.
The people we have here. We have great people, okay? This is Ben being modest. So maybe I was lying to you. Maybe it didn't take us 6 months. Maybe it took us 20 years because we were able to leverage those 20 years of experience by building good software architectures. We're very good at building good to great robots very quickly because of the modularity, okay? There's other problems with this robot. We'll skip it. So let's talk about modular robots for a second, okay? Not only did we get good at building modular robots, my students formed this company called Heavy Robotics that builds these modular robots. And not this one though, this one's Yishu's. Yishu's over here. This is a 4.5, 5 foot tall robot. We don't know why they wanted them. But the rest are ours, are Heavies. And modularity is great because you can build, rearrange, and build all kinds of robots. You're not limited to the snakes. The other reason why I like modularity is it gives an opportunity for the user and the designer to closely interact. Now that you have a modular robot, you know, the user, and pay attention to this. This is, learn anything today, this is it. We're not going to figure out how to use our technology. We don't know. It's going to be the user. And being in close ties with the user, the worker, the associate, is what will drive our development. So I believe having a modular robot will facilitate that interaction because now the user only has to say, let's change this one little thing over here, and we can. So this is cool, but then it raises a question. How do you design modular robots? The age-old, big-old trick is you have a bag of modules and you want to be able to arrange and rearrange them to carry out some task. And you could imagine just generating a tree where I put a module here and another module here, a different module here, and expand every possible combination. That will grow very quickly. That will computationally explode. There'll be too many modules among which you can select what your design can do. So instead, this is my student. It was Julian Whitman and Jeff Hu. They came up with this network architecture that I kind of like. Essentially, you have this generator that just generates some arrangement of modules. And this is copied from the vision community. And this generator just generates from some bag of modules, some designs. Then you evolve the designs, okay? The designs are evolved, and then there's a discriminator. What's happening is this discriminator traditionally tries to say, is it real data or fake data? But instead, it's trying to say, was it originally generated or was it slightly evolved? And there's an arms war between generating things that might look evolved and so forth. And when that converges, you can sort of say, maybe you're done. Now, that's nice, we generate designs, but I think the real trick is being able to evaluate how good your designs are, and that's with this reward network that we also created. Before, we had this simulator that would simulate each possible design, that was computationally burdensome. So maybe the real hero here is here. And you can see in this example, what we have are different arrangements of modules. And the environment, and all we're doing is we're showing that as the environment changes, the optimal design, optimal that's measured with respect to some criteria the network says is optimal, of course, changes. So you see, whereas before you started with wheels, now it's getting bumpier and bumpier, and you have legs. You know, the idea being that a wheeled platform should go better on flat terrain, a legged platform goes better on rough terrain. And of course, we're showing the designs that we built. Okay, so I'm gonna end the first vignette of this talk. That was snake robots, modularity, and some geometric mechanics, because I want to change topics. But before I do that, does anyone have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
As a non-roboticist, I'm just wondering what the advantages to, like you had just mentioned, like rough terrain, the robots with legs, smooth terrain, wheeled robots. Yeah, sorry, the connection's a little shaky there. These other ones, are they just, what do they add? Because the ones with wheels and legs.
So wheels are better on flat ground, presumably legs, and this is only a half truth, are better on bumpy grounds.
Mhm.
So as the ground gets bumpier and bumpier, we generate more legged designs. As it's medium bumpy, it's a combination of legs
okay.
and wheels.
Gotcha.
And then we're just showing everything working on flat ground. I don't know why we do that. Okay, I'm gonna change topics now to search, information search. And our contribution to search, and this is searching for stuff, has to do with heterogeneous agents, dealing with multiple objectives at once, and then maybe forming teams. So the application again, and this is what we wrote about in the AI proposal, is one has to do with response, okay? So, you know, as you can tell from my accent, I'm from New York. And when I went to Brooklyn to go to the response center there, this is after 9/11, of course, they were not happy about the attacks. But what really scared them was they were gonna do more. And the problem is when there's lots of attacks going on, all sorts of different locations, that's just all out chaos. And that's what the rescuers are worried about, a lot of things, but that aspect is something they worry about. So when there's a mass, hello, Prasanna, nice to see you. We have brownies. So when you have a massive scale disaster, the thing that is most important, the thing that you can get, that you need to get is information. And there's so many ways we can get information, okay? Of course, we wanna find out where there are signs of life, and we being AI, roboticists and the such, we think to send out the robots to get the information. And there are other things, other ways we can get information, we want to acknowledge that. But what we're interested in is, where do you direct the agents to go? Okay, and that's where this idea of ergodic search is gonna come up. And this is something that my friend Igor Mezic and his student came up with a while ago. And then my academic brother continued this work. So I'll explain ergodic search pretty quickly. Imagine you have, you know, some a priori information as to where things are located. Okay, in this picture here, gold means there's a lot of good stuff there, maybe signs of life. And blue means low likelihood there's stuff there. So you might think, let's just send the agents to this gold location. And that's not a bad idea, but it's very exploitive. And as you know, in the machine learning world, there's always this balance between exploration and exploitation. You still need a balance. So, because there still could be something over here. The way we handle this is, let's look at this information map, okay? And we're gonna represent it as a distribution, and we're gonna come up with another distribution, a second distribution. The second one describes how our agents move and sense, okay? So you can imagine there's a distribution that's really flat everywhere, but has a nice peak or ridge where our agents are going, or robots are going. And they can be people, because people are agents too. So you can imagine there are these two distributions. What we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the difference of those distributions and drive them to zero. By driving the distance of these distributions to zero, you're creating paths for these agents to cover your region where you spend proportionately more time in regions where there's high likelihood of discovering something, but you still have time to go to the low likelihood locations. This is our way, I'm not saying necessarily it's the best way, but it's a way to balance exploration versus exploitation. And then by driving this to this is called an ergodic measure to zero, you can, I guess we often restrict the ergodic measure. The contribution that we had, and I say we, I really mean Ananya Rao and my postdoc, his first name is Guillaume, and I can never pronounce his last name, Satoreti?
Already.
Pretty good. But I got it right?
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah, and I saw a Swiss dog this morning, two of them. He's from Switzerland, and he's a faculty at NUS. Is it NUS or NTU? I just confuse those two. NUS, he's a faculty at NUS. So what we do, and this is Guillaume's and Ananya's insight, and I'm gonna brag in a minute. Instead of just allocating our agents by forcing this difference to go to zero, we recognize that, you know, the way we do this is we hit the Fourier decomposition, because you can't take differences of functions directly, at least I don't know how. But if you notice, with the Fourier decomposition, the lower modes may correspond to an agent with a broad but low resolution center. And the higher order modes are correspond to agents with a sense with a fine resolution. They have a different physical meaning, okay? And that was our insight. And by pushing that insight, we can now, just by doing straightforward optimization, allocate agents with broad sensor footprints versus agents with low sensor footprints. Now I have to acknowledge, this again is just insight, it's our hand, but this is what the DARS paper was about, right? Okay, the DARS paper stands for?
Distributed Autonomous Robotics Systems, I think is the conference name.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And Ananya won best paper the year she submitted her paper as an undergrad. Okay, there were 3 nominations for best paper, 2 were from Carnegie Mellon. Okay, the other paper, number 2, he's no longer here. Ananya still is, okay? But Ananya wanted to add more wanted to do a little bit better. You know, it was an observation. So here, and this always makes me feel awkward explaining other people's work while they're in the room. But what we're gonna do is, let's pretend we only have 2 agents now, okay? So we could, let's just take this guy here. Do I want that guy? Do I want to use the one that's uniform? Okay, so we have 2 agents, and there's an information map. You know, once again, 2 separate information maps. And there's something screwing me up, Anand. What's screwing me up? We have the 2 information maps. So it's one information map with 2 agents. Am I doing well so far? Thank you. And what we're going to do now is do essentially a gradient descent to figure out how the coefficients for this map and the coefficients for this agent and for this agent would converge. But we're not doing gradient descent, we're doing this policy thing where we generate a policy, that's the action. We evaluate the ergodicity that we get for each of these agents. We put it into this value function, there's some error, and that error is input into the policy. And the thing runs round and round and around and around until you converge at different allocations of your spectral bands. Okay, I got that right? Okay, good. If you start where everyone has an initial condition of everyone's the same, you converge where, yeah, some go to the left, some go to low frequency, high frequency. Here, if you start with this functional approximation where everyone starts together, and that's a Gaussian, you'll end up with 2 Gaussians, but one that favors the low and one that favors the high, which is similar to what our observation had. I have to explain this better. Okay, so that's nice. And that was her work. But what we want to do now is, please.
So what is, I missed something here. I mean, I agree it makes sense that to allocate the 2 agents to like higher and lower frequency, but how do you have that information about the spectral bands to start with?
Oh, well, in this case here, we just guess an initial condition.
You start with something.
Yeah, we start with something we
uniform
know.
and
Yeah, so here we start with uniform, here we start with that they're all distributed as a Gaussian, and through the magic of machine learning. That could have been interpreted as an insult, I agree with that. Using this network that Ananya uses, you end up with these from our observation. So what I want to do now is I want to talk about multi-objective ergodic search. Okay, is that what I wanna do next? Yeah, let's do that next. Okay, so we're gonna do ergodic search, just for a single agent for the moment, but with multiple objectives. So I think some of you have, let's just skip that, okay. Some of you have heard of the so-called Pareto optimal front, or, these Nash equilibrium, does that sound familiar to anybody? No, oh, that's okay. So let's say, you have two criteria you wanna minimize. So, this can be, speed at which you get to your target, and this can be safety, G1, G2. And here is a state which has this G1 value and this G2 value, okay? So it's some state that has, it's evaluated with this amount of safety, this amount of speed. So far, so good? So this state up here, A, B is better than A because it's smaller in both objectives. So we can say that B dominates A, okay? Likewise, C is, so B is better than C, because again, it's smaller in both objectives. So we can say B dominates C. Right? Now there's a D over here. D is better than B in this objective, but worse than B in that objective. So B does not dominate D. B and D, you can say, are non-dominating. They're examples of non-dominating states. The set of all non-dominated states, that's what forms the so-called Pareto optimal front. Okay, so before, whereas we're looking for a unique optimum, now we could be looking for a set that are all Pareto optimal because they're non-dominated, and then you can add some additional criteria afterwards that you care. So let's talk about the single agent so it's SA, single agent, multi-objective, ergodic search. I thought of this naming convention myself. You have 3 information maps. Now you're all pros with these information maps, high information, low information, and so forth. And there have been other people who've worried about multi-objective ergodic search. Their approach, at least the one we know about, is sort of an evolutionary approach. They take some initial guesses, they run some evolution style approach where they'll take their initial guesses, compute their ergodicities, figure out which ones are non-dominating, throw away the ones that are not non-dominating. Thank you. If you keep the non-dominating ones, and then you perturb the you duplicate a couple of non-dominating ones, so your population is the same size. You perturb it a little bit and repeat. And the hope is that eventually you'll come up with the Pareto optimal set, which is one of those blue or not blue, green or yellow ones. Our approach is a little different. What we do is we take our information maps and we compute a linear combination of them. In fact, we do a little bit better. We compute the convex combination of them. And there were some smart people who proved one thing, but we proved that if you take the convex combination of your information maps and then minimize ergodicity on that convex combination, the value of ergodicity that you're gonna get will be an element, and then you take this trajectory and evaluate the ergodicity on each of the original maps, you'll get an element of the Pareto optimal set. Okay, so you don't have to start computing ergodicity for each set and then form these vectors to find the Pareto optimal sets. You can get a convex combination, compute just once, and then evaluate afterwards. Okay, so this scales really nicely, or it benefits us really nicely when we have lots of criteria against which we want to do ergodic search. We can do that, and then since we were able to prove that a convex combination of the original maps give us elements of the Pareto optimal set, we just perturb what we just found, subject to the constraint that the sum of the weights still go to 1 and all the weights are greater than 1. And from that, we're able to generate a Pareto frontier that's better than the other ones. So there is some Pareto set here, but we're coming up with a better approximation, and you know that because the volume of the space above and to the right is bigger. So here we're comparing ourselves to others, and look at us, we're great. So what we want to do now is multi-agent multi-objective ergodic search. Okay, so you have R robots. We chose the letter R because R for robot, M maps, M for map. And we want to come up with the right allocation that gives us the best map, which minimizes the maximum ergodicity. Okay, so a couple definitions, a pairing. In this picture here, robot 1 and maps 1 and 2, they're in a pairing. Robot 3 and map 3, they're in a pairing. These are different kinds of pairings. And allocation is just a set of pairings. So these are 3 examples of allocations. You can have others. What we're going to do is we want to figure out how to allocate our robots to maps, and then from there compute our ergodicities. But the thing is, there's an exponential number of robots, there's an exponential number of I guess, allocations with the number of robots and the number of maps. So this is work we just started, and I have to acknowledge it's work that my former master's student, Akshaya Srivasan, I pronounced that correctly? Okay. Started, and then Bhaskar there's no way. Finished, okay? So what we'll do is, we're gonna do this branch and bound thing, but we need some sort of like initial value before we do our branch and bound. So we picked some idea. I gotta be honest with you, I think it's brain dead, but it's probably, I can't think of anything better. So we have 2 robots in this case, robots 1, robots 2, robot 1, robot 2. Doesn't matter really. And we just place these robots down at the same place, but on different information maps. And then if robot 1, we try to put robot 1 near a peak of an information map here, and robot 2 near some other peak. Who knows why we picked that? And then after we have those numbers, we optimize for ergodicity again, and we get values of ergodicity. And we end up with this initial upper bound for ergodicity. Okay, you want ergodicity to be small. Again, who knows? It's a way of coming up with this. So now we're going to do our branch and bound. So we start with robot 1, and it can be allocated, paired, with any of these maps. However, we know that when we do the pairing with these 2 maps, we may as well just throw them away, because whatever initial upper bound we came up with is better than these. So they go away. We then can expand our tree again, where now robot 2, now in this case it's trivial, robot 1 was with map 1, so robot 2 could be with maps 2 and 3, and other combinations. And we compute their respective ergodicities. And once again, we can throw these guys away because they're not as good as this initial bound. In fact, we get something that's pretty short here. So what's nice about this approach, let's see, is this gonna work? Maybe if I hit this button. Yeah. So what's nice about this approach is we're leveraging ideas of the information mapping ergodicity to come up with different ways to allocate robot teams. So just to remind you where we're at, we want to look for stuff. In this case, they're homogeneous robots, but they're trying to find different, or search for different kinds of information at the same time. And we're using ergodicity to balance that trade-off between exploration and exploitation. And we're using ergodicity to assign the teams. Okay, now, I don't want to say if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but at least we have a number, a measure by which we're justifying our search and our allocation scheme. And we hope to expand on this with heterogeneous agents. So I'm going to explain one more thing about ergodic search, and then we're done. So this is work that Albert Chu and his co-advisor, Jeff Schneider, is doing. We want to be able to handle obstacles, okay? And others have thought about handling obstacles, including us. So this is our work where it's some random way to look at it. And this is also Ian Abraham's work as well, where he comes up with some optimization based on ergodicity. What we do instead is we create a flow field on each of these on the free space. Now I want to be clear, these are not three different information maps. This is the same free space, but written three different times with three different flow fields. Now, these flow fields have a property that they're volume preserving. So if you take any little circle here, same size circle, at other places, I guess the measure of flux is the same, more or less, okay? So they're volume preserving, and the reason why that's important is that the ergodic measure also has a volume preserving property to it. So what we do is we flow along this field, this field for a while, and we just measure the ergodicity, okay? Magically, according to some parameter, we'll get that in a second, and of course, when I'm saying magic, we're really gonna say optimization afterwards. We change fields and we flow along this field for a little while, okay? And then when we get to this point here, we decide to flow along this field, okay? So there are parameters that describe how long and where to start and where to stop here. There are parameters likewise and so forth. This trajectory is described by essentially 9 parameters now, 3 for each turn, okay? We have the property that we know the flow fields will never intersect, okay? And we also have the observation that will go eventually everywhere. Or is that the proof? We prove we eventually go everywhere. Yes. Yeah. And that's what Albert proves. So by proving that we can go everywhere, we now have an ergodic search based approach to look for information in the presence of obstacles. Okay, and this was nominated for best paper at the same conference Ananya's paper won best paper. So I'm hoping, and this conference will be in New York. So we're proud of that. So here we're just showing how this approach, gets us through narrow corridors, because that was the challenge all the other obstacle-based approaches had. They were too stochastic, or they just couldn't get you through the places. Okay, I'll stop there and see if anyone have any questions. So what I want to talk about a little bit now is actual path planning between a start and goal location, but in the presence of obstacles with lots of robots. And we all know about the different applications. I think we're all happy with the warehouse application. These are another warehouse application. Here we're actually building airplanes. And one of my students is the one who formed the company in Shanghai. But at its core, the problem we want to solve is, here's a robot that wants to get to its goal, or there's an agent who wants to get to its goal, okay? And as you know, this problem suffers from the curse of dimensionality. Planning a path for one robot is so hard, planning a path for 2 robots is twice as hard, planning a path for 3 robots 4 times as hard, 4 robots 8 times as hard. You get the picture, right? So we want to be able to beat that curse of dimensionality. And this is work that Glenn Wagner this is Glenn Wagner's approach. So with our curse of dimensionality, this is what I was saying before, you have all these robots working together, it's centralized, maybe you can prove stuff. The alternative actually is have every robot fend for itself. And what problem will you get there? Sorry? Collisions. Actually, when we go to avoid collisions, we then get a problem. Remember, you computer scientists? You all have chopsticks, you're at a table, you wanna eat dinner. They still teach the diet, yeah.
Deadlocks?
Deadlock, yeah. We can arrange an antagonistic way of getting deadlock. So if every robot plans for itself, you get deadlock. If you coordinate all the robots, your computers are too slow. So what we came up with is this idea called subdimensional expansion. Essentially, you have every robot plan a path for itself. And then when a collision occurs, I don't wanna say back propagate because that means something, but I can't think of a better word now, back propagate to a point where each robot could have gone someplace else. Okay, and then plan from there. Another way to say it is plan a path, every robot for itself, and when the 2 robots come into collision, locally grow your configuration space. So whereas you're starting with planar configuration spaces, if these 2 robots collide, then you have this 4-dimensional configuration space. And if 3 robots, it grows. So worst case, you're gonna have the same computational bottleneck But on average, we were able to show that it doesn't happen. Okay, so every robot plans for itself, grow the configuration space, and when you no longer need to be in a shared configuration space, collapse down to everything. So here, believe it or not, this is 200 robots here playing a path from start to goal. And in this example, at the time when my student got his PhD, there wasn't enough computation on the planet if you were using A-star to look one step into the future, let alone among obstacles. Now, one of the problems with this approach, however, is that it's centralized. You know, people always criticize, oh, you need a centralized planner. So we wanted to get around that. And this is where Guillaume, did I spell his name right? No, okay. Had this nice idea. So what we'll do is we're gonna use your standard reinforcement learning that you all know about. And that to me still felt like a black art. But some of the time, we're gonna use the prior planner as an expert. And we're gonna do learning from demonstration. Okay? The policy we end up eventually we come up with is the robot can see within its vicinity. Okay? So the robot's here, it can see maybe through obstacles, but at least it's a little distant, it's a limited field of view. And here's 1,000 robots. Okay? Now, one of the lies I'm telling you is that the obstacle density isn't so good. But it's still nice that we can now have every robot plan for itself without any regard of coordinating, and still they can go from start to goal. I just acknowledge that we have a multi-agent, multi-objective pathfinding result as well. Hooray, we do better than the others who did it. So I'm gonna stop there and go on to the next, maybe the last topic, but I want to see if anyone has any questions. Yeah.
How would humans solve the multi-path problem, and how is that different how your robots work? Like, one thing I'm thinking is that humans use subtle nonverbal communication to signal where they're going, so the other person stays out of their way.
So so first, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know. We'll start there. But what's interesting is with the snake work, if I had time, a common question people ask me is, are you biologically inspired? Okay, and of course, I didn't think of a snake robot. Well, I didn't think of a snake robot either, but you know, the original guy looked at a snake and thought robot, but was he really biologically inspired? Okay, were we biologically inspired when we made our robots work? And the answer is no, we weren't. And interestingly, and at the end, I'll show you a picture of some real snakes, because we took recourse to making the fundamental mechanics to make our robot work, we were then able to provide insight on how real snakes locomoted. And we have an example for we figured out two things in sidewinders, and we figured out something else as to how snakes lost their legs. And from that, one of my project scientists figured out how to build a small height-crawling robot that's ridiculously fast. I don't believe we're decoding any mysteries of how humans work here with this. I wish we were. I just don't think we are. But I should give that a little more thought.
I mean, I guess an interesting question could be, what if you have human and robot agents all finding their path at the same time? Like, how do you want your robots to operate so that the humans can also perform successfully in that environment?
Correct. So in that case, I would have gone back to my original multi-agent search, what I call M-star, not A-star, M-star, And when choosing, on the priority queue, instead of choosing basing my cost to come, and then my heuristic based on strict distance, I would have to figure out a way to measure human intent. Okay, that's just sweeping the problem under the rug. Okay, and I really hate when people do that. Okay, I'm going to do that today because that's the best I can offer. But I suspect that's where we can plug this in. But I would want to be respectful of what people do. But then, if we could do that, huge if. Then yeah, we can navigate in a way that humans would feel natural. But I'm being very respectful of what humans do here, because I don't want to say we decoded any secrets there. But thank you for the question. Wait, what am I doing? Actually, I just want to say we have a multi-agent traveling salesman problem version of this, which is nice. The thing that's interesting here is we have these two loops. Again, we solve a traveling salesman problem on a graph. We then get the list of nodes we have to visit. We then do a path planning problem, again, subdimensional expansion. And then when we have to expand too much, where we can't visit the nodes in the originally prescribed order, we go back and solve another traveling salesman problem. I'm highlighting this because this is nice architecture of in and out from multiple agents going to multiple locations. And this is where this is being demonstrated. The reason why I'm rushing is this is a new result I want to brag about. This is a neat bots work with Steve, the same professor at Texas A&M. We're solving a moving target traveling salesman problem. So the targets are the stars. These things here are the windows during which you're allowed to visit the target. Okay, so as long as you get to that target in that specified time window, then it counts as visited. So you see now, here's the agent, you see it waited for the pink guy. It's running around solving this single agent, moving target traveling salesman problem. And what Anoop has done is the innovation here, I'll hint at it in a second, but it's very limited to the planar case, his innovation. He did make this work in 3 dimensions, but we weren't able to take advantage of some geometries. We haven't figured this out quite yet. And again, here are the windows you can visit, and then here's, but that's where the agent has to end up. It's start and stop the same place, and there you see it's going around visiting. There it is, it's a star. The way this works is we'll explain in the planar case, you have a window, and let's give that window a node. So this is a target window combination. It has that orange colored node. From there, it'll ask, the algorithm says, okay, what other windows can I visit? Okay, so starting from here, can I get to one of these nodes here? And since we are making our lives a little bit easier by assuming these are going to be piecewise linear paths and also with polygonal obstacles, we can approximate very quickly, knowing what the start and end time are, would we be able to make it to that node, to that window? And if so, what the path should be, T sub S. If that path exists, then we create another node. Again, it's a window, it's a combination of a target and a window, and we connect an edge there. So we're gonna start forming a tree. So the if you can get to the, those are the words I just said. The other thing we should note is when we go and expand, and so also you can see this guy, you can get to this purple guy as well. The only other condition I should point out is if there had been a green parent to this orange node, then it's not allowed in, okay, because you've already visited that node. So you just generate this tree, and once the tree is generated, then you just follow the search along the shortest path, and voila, that's the solution to your moving agent traveling salesman problem. The truth is, the secret is in finding this path to begin with. What Anoop does in the planar case is he actually creates something that's a generalization of the visibility graph. Do you all know what a visibility graph is? Well, as long as he knows it, I'm okay. But the thing with the visibility graph is it requires your world is polygonal, and it only gives you an optimal path in the plane. Okay, so the nodes of the visibility graph are the same polygons and the windows. Okay, when he gets into higher dimensions, he actually discretizes points along the target and plans there. So in my last 5 minutes, I just want to mention something about medical robotics, because it's something I spent a fair bit of time on. In the old days, I used to ask, now I know what I'm supposed to do. I used to ask the question, has anyone had surgery yet? And apparently, you know, I'm not allowed to ask that because it's your medical history. Okay, but I had knee surgery, for example. I also had a toe removed. The thing about surgery is it hurts. It can be expensive, and it really has limited access. With minimally invasive surgery, it reduces the pain, it actually reduces the cost, and this is the thing I'm pretty excited about. You can actually disseminate care to people that may not otherwise have gotten the surgery. So here, we built a small surgical snake robot. So there's my robot in a live fluoroscopy. And the robot here is going, so you all have a heart, I know that. And your hearts are in pericardiums. Pericardiums are transparent. So now the snake robot is being driven between this woman's heart and pericardium, okay? What you see here is, here's her heart. This pericardium is not white, these are her lungs, but the pericardium is transparent. That's a visualization from this catheter over here, where you can see where the snake is going. Now, this woman received a procedure that normally would have required 14 days of recovery, but she was able to get out of the hospital the next day, and only had a small incision, 15 mm incision over here, instead of a full sternum. So that's pretty cool. The other thing is, Petter Newsel over here, he's not a surgeon. So this is the first time we did an epicardial mapping and ablation of a person's heart without cracking the chest. Okay, I was there. My job that day, so you might think it's pretty cool, you know, inventing a robot and then seeing it operate on a person. It was the second most anticlimactic experience of my life. The first one was getting a PhD. My job that day was to take pictures. That's what they let me do, okay? And they didn't let me take all the pictures I wanted. So I'll skip that. I just want to point out a couple of other medical things. We've gotten very good at building these ventilators. You all remember the ventilator craze? You remember the pandemic? Okay, there's a big ventilator craze. One of our peer institutions, I can't say which because I have to be nice, but it's not us. Wasn't Pitt either, wasn't in the city. They had an open source ventilator to sort of address this. So I called them up to say, hey, you know, we have our own. We're very good at building embedded systems. Why don't we work together? This peer institution said, listen, we have a couple of really good undergrads. We're good. So you know the phrase, if you can't join them, beat them. So we built our own ventilator, which is, you know, maybe 80% as functional as a hospital ventilator, but a tenth of the price, with parts that were readily sourced. So I was pretty happy about that, because when people go on ventilators, half of them die. Okay, and it's not because the ventilators are bad, it's just because they're very sick. And with this low-cost portable ventilator, I thought we can like sort of derail the progression of illness that people had before they get even sicker. But no one cared about that, which surprised me. What they cared about is that it was connected to the internet. And that's something we just do as a matter of development. So what we're doing is we're now looking at ways to throw data into the cloud, and then can we learn from that data progressions as to where things are going, okay? Our secret sauce is this connectivity, what we do here. This is the machine learning algorithms that we're using are ones that, if I know about it, then I'm not an expert. I'm a user of these things. And this is something that we're starting. We also spun off a company. It's called Omnibus Medical Devices. Omnibus Medical Devices for the rest of us. So I'll stop there, because we're sort of out of time. I just wanted to highlight this ultrasound work. Oh, let me say one more thing. So we're doing a bunch of ultrasound work. Have any of you ever seen an ultrasound image before? No one likes looking at ultrasound, except if it's a baby and it's yours.
The skull's still freaky.
Yeah. But the problem with ultrasound, it's just hard to understand. Okay, so what we've done is we started developing a variety of techniques to do segmentation of ultrasound images. And the challenge that we're addressing is how to say this is what this vessel is and so forth, not only in a crappy image, but when that image is being pressed. And we have this approach called URAFT. RAFT is this thing smart people developed. It helps you figure out how things move and deform, whatever. But the problem with RAFT is that it requires a lot of data. You have to label your data. What my student came up with, and he no longer wants to come back because he's in a real job, is called URAFT, unsupervised RAFT. And the way it works is you start with your original image, and then you deform it. You just press, okay? And then you use RAFT to figure out what the vector field that this image is described with respect to that image. Okay, this is the deformable registration. you then use the standard network here to reconstruct the deformed image back to the original image. Okay, so this is the reconstructed deformed image. So what Avi does is he then takes the reference image again, so it's the same as over here, okay? He deforms, which one does he deform? I guess he deforms this one. No, he deforms this one. He adds back and he gets a reconstructed reference image. So you're using RAF twice, and in doing so, you now have a way of identifying what the deformation fields are. With that, you can create all sorts of loss functions to do, see all these different tasks. We ended up using it for not only segmentation of vessels, we were also actually able to predict the rhythm of the respiratory motion, needle tracking, and other stuff. So I'll stop there and I'll just go to my concluding slide. And there's the volume inspiration I was talking about. You know, I told you this lie in the beginning that we start with basic research, we apply it, and then it goes back and informs, but the truth is, it's a mess. Okay, so I'll stop there. I'm gonna leave this slide up because I wanna highlight to the students that a lot of you have this image as to what a professor is, what a professor does. And it turns out that research and education, or actually education and research, are our primary missions, but we do other things, entrepreneurship, policy advice, mentorship, and other things. So there I'm gonna stop and thank you for your kind attention and see if you have any questions.